Today I'm going to be taking a look at Fedora 32. I'm going to take a look at Fedora Workstation Live. I'm going to do an installation and a quick first look inside a virtual machine. So Fedora 32 was released just a couple of days ago. It was released on April 28th. I'm recording this on May 1st, so 3 days after the big release. Some notable changes in Fedora 32 are going to include, of course, it's running the latest version of GNOME, GNOME 3.36. It's also running GCC 10, Ruby 2.7, and Python 3.8. It is worth noting that because Python 2 has really been end of life for many years now, they have removed most of Python 2 from the Fedora system now. So I'm going to go over to my desktop here, and I'm going to install this inside Virt Manager today. I'm going to create a new virtual machine here. I'm going to install from a local ISO. I downloaded the ISO from their website. Here is the Fedora Workstation Live ISO. And it has already chosen the correct operating system. It knows it's Fedora, so I don't have to search around for that in any kind of list. I'm going to give this VM 4 gigs of RAM. I'm going to give it 2 CPUs out of the 24 possible on my system. So those are pretty good specs for a VM. That's more than enough system resources to run this thing. I'm going to create a 25 gig virtual hard drive. And now that I've got that created, find Fedora in the list. I'm going to double click it. All right, and let me move this window out of the way and full screen this. And we are ready to go. So we have our boot menu. It's asking me, do I want to start Fedora Workstation Live 32, test this media, troubleshoot? I just want to go straight into Fedora 32 here. All right, and we have booted successfully into the live environment. Now we are given the option, do we want to try Fedora, meaning just play around in the live environment, or do we actually want to install this? So I'm going to run through the installation. The installation is really the most important parts to these sorts of things, especially if I'm just, checking them out for an hour or two. There's really no reason not to go through the installation because I'm not going to spend enough time in these VMs to really, give a proper review, which is why I don't call these things reviews. But the installation is very important. The installation tells you a lot because if the installation fails, then it's probably not worth your time as far as installing on physical equipment. All right, so language has been selected. English US is correct for me. And then we come to the next screen. Localization keyboard has been chosen. English US, time and date, America, Chicago. That's the correct time zone, so I don't have to change any of that. Installation, destination. Let's click on that. Select the devices you'd like to install to. I want to install to that 25 gig virtual hard drive. And then I think all I need to do is click done here. I don't install Fedora that often, and it's always strange, this installer. You see, I didn't actually select the disk. Where do I go from here? Automatic, custom. Okay, let me click done again. It's the same thing I did before. Yeah, I don't know. This installer is always confusing. Every single time I go, I don't install Fedora every day. It's always, 8-9 months in between releases when I take a look at Fedora. But this installer, I've never liked this installer. Now, it typically installs correctly. It's just, it's confusing. The layout of it is not very user-friendly. Like Ubuntu's Ubiquity installer is so easy, right? You just click OK 3 or 4 times, and you don't have to wonder where everything is on the screen. Same thing with the Calamares installer. By the way, the screen, the VM, is flickering badly here. I have no idea why it's doing that. I'm going to pause the video though and let this installation complete. And maybe once the installation is complete and we reboot the machine, maybe the flickering will go away. That's very strange. I mean, it's flickering like a couple of times every second. And the installation has completed. That only took 5 minutes or so. So very fast installation. I'll click finish installation and see if it reboots itself. May not. I may have to take care of the rebooting myself. So I'm just going to power off this virtual machine because I'm going to go ahead and detach the ISO. Otherwise, we're just going to get put right back into the live environment. Go back to the virtual machine. I'm going to click on the details here. And I'm just going to make sure that the boot options are correct, that it's going to boot off the hard drive and not any kind of ISO. Everything looks all right. Let's see. Yeah, this is our freshly installed Fedora 32, so it installed correctly. And it looked like it detached the ISO and everything on its own. So. All right, and we are presented with a welcome screen as soon as we get here. We haven't really completed the installation at this point. The installation, we never chose a username and password or anything like that, so we need to go ahead and take care of that. I'm just going to choose some default settings here. I'm not going to connect any online accounts, and I will create my username. I'll call myself DT, and then I'll create a strong and complicated password for the DT user for privacy reasons. And then I'm going to start using Fedora. All right, and we are rebooting the machine. I'm logging back in. It's asking for my password for the DT user. I should have checked the session that we were logging into to see if this VM is using Wayland or Xorg. By default, I'm pretty sure Fedora defaults to using Wayland. But Wayland is going to cause us some issues as far as the screen resolution. This looks a little small. Let's see if we can actually change that. I know we can change it if we were using X11. I can just do an X render. Let's see if we can change the screen resolution to a proper 1080 resolution. Yeah, we can. All right. Much better. I will say, gorgeous wallpaper. It's a really attractive distro for a kind of a simple, minimal distribution because it uses a rather plain vanilla GNOME, but I don't mind that much. A lot of people are going to hate the rather plain version of GNOME. You know, it's kind of like, you know, until you get under the hood, you're like, wow, this is a really attractive distribution. Beautiful wallpaper, you know, it looks clean, looks polished. And then when you start playing around with GNOME and you realize you got to install half a dozen extensions to make it usable, you know, then you realize all that pretty look, you know, that nice aesthetic was just basically skin deep, right? It was like that hot girl you've always wanted to get with, you know, and then, you know, when you finally get close to her, you realize she's got body odor. Yeah, it's kind of like Fedora. Fedora with GNOME, it's a hot blonde, but she has BO. I'm going to go through the menu system here, and let's see what is installed by default. We have GNOME boxes, which is a front end to QEMU for virtual machines. Very similar to what I'm using to run this VM here. Virt Manager, GNOME boxes is something similar from the GNOME project. I have GNOME calendars, Cheese, which is a webcam program. GNOME clocks, contacts, files. Of course, this is the Nautilus file manager. I will say, I don't know why they ship such a plain vanilla GNOME, because the default GNOME icon set just looks so bad. Like, you really need to change this. And this is files 3.36. But man, that icon set looks bad. Like, you get so many things right with the look and feel of this distribution. You can't ship with that icon set. Guys, Fedora guys, put something else. I mean, there's so many good icon sets out there. And they're shipping with the Firefox web browser. And let's take a look at what version of Firefox we are on here in Fedora 32. We are on Firefox 75.0. And let's close that out. That's going to warn me that we're closing multiple tabs. We have the LibreOffice suite. Let's check out LibreOffice Writer. I'm sure they're on the latest version of LibreOffice as well. So if I check out LibreOffice, they should be on version 6.4.2.2. Close that out. LibreOffice is a fantastic office suite. It's our free and open source alternative to something like Microsoft Office. We have GNOME Maps. We have Rhythmbox, which is GNOME's audio player. Fantastic audio player, Rhythmbox. If you need a GTK-based audio player, Rhythmbox is quite good. If I'm running a distribution and they happen to ship Rhythmbox by default, I will use it. I don't go out of my way to uninstall Rhythmbox. And we have our software center. Let's take a look at the GNOME Software Center. So let's go shopping. And I notice there's a little glitch there. We ended up with half the window above the panel there. One of my neighbors is firing up his lawnmower. I hope that's not bleeding through the microphone. But one really neat thing about the Software Center here is it's asking us, do we want to enable third-party software repositories? Yes, that's fantastic. That's one of the complaints some people have with distributions like Fedora is they typically only have free software in their repositories. So if you need especially proprietary software, proprietary drivers and codecs and things like that, you have to go through some hoops to enable some third-party repositories to get that stuff. So that's nice that they ask you about that. I'm assuming enabling that third-party repositories there gave us options to install Flatpaks. I am not sure. If I go to software repositories, I wonder if it'll actually list what repositories we have. Well, here's some we could enable that are not enabled by default. RPM Fusion is one most people probably want to enable. It's going to have some proprietary software in it that you're going to need. The Fedora Modular repository, I'm not sure what's in that, and Linux Vendor Firmware Service. Okay. I wonder if we can install Flatpaks out of the box here in Fedora. I'm not sure if they have that stuff enabled by default or not. So if I wanted to search for some proprietary software like Discord, I'm pretty sure Discord is available as a Flatpak. What else is available as a Flatpak? Is Spotify? I know it's popular proprietary software. I typically don't use these kinds of programs. Spotify I've never used. It doesn't look like I can get any of that. I really need to bring up a terminal to figure some of this stuff out. I wish I knew the hotkey to bring up a terminal, but it wasn't something that was easy to figure out. Can I search for term here? I know I'm fumbling around a little bit in this guy. I don't use GNOME that often, though, and I don't use Fedora very often. And the combination of being in a strange desktop environment that I don't use and a distribution that chooses not to make their key bindings very easy for me to at least figure out how to bring up a terminal when I need it is causing me some issues here. So if I do a Flatpak list, if there's any Flatpaks on the system, that should list them. No. If I do a where is Flatpak, let's see if Flatpak is even installed. Flatpak is here, so we could install some Flatpaks if we wanted to. Of course, the default package manager in Fedora is DNF. Those of you that have never used DNF, similar commands to apt. So if I did a DNF search, I could search for something, search for GIMP. Maybe I want to install GIMP. And it will, oh, wow. I guess it's actually got to sync the repositories first before it searches. This is the very first time I've run DNF, so it would make sense for it to need to do a sync here. I have been waiting like 2 minutes for this repository to sync so it can complete my search for GIMP. This thing is so slow. Why are your repositories so slow to sync? Or at least one of them is. This is slower than the molasses in January. Alright, I think finally all the repositories have finished the sync. You can see that last one took 2.5 minutes to sync. I spent basically the last 3 minutes waiting for this search to complete. And it still has not completed. Okay, now we get some more information. Alright, finally. So that's how you do a search in DNF. DNF search, name of application, of course, to install. I'm not going to bother installing, but DNF install GIMP would install it. If you were removing a package, then of course DNF remove package would remove it. Any other questions you might have with DNF, I'm sure they've got a man page. So if you did a man DNF, you would get all the commands there. You see, you get a complete list of everything that you could use with the DNF package manager. I'm going to quit out of the man page. I'm going to do a uname-r. Let's see what kernel we are using. We are using the very latest 5.6.6. I mean, that's pretty recent for a kernel. I'm on an Arch-based system, and on Arch, I'm on 5.6.8. So 5.6.6 is a very recent kernel. which you would expect. Fedora typically is kind of bleeding edge. When they release, they're using usually like the latest and greatest software. They're usually not holding stuff back, trying to make the distribution rock solid stable. They push the envelope a little bit. See if htop is installed on the system. It is not. Well, I guess I could. Well, probably need to run it with sudo dnf install htop. Give it my sudo password. Thankfully, we don't have to wait for the repositories to sync since we've already done it. I guess by default, when you install software, it asks you, is this okay? On most systems, the default is yes. On this system, the default is no. So when I just click enter without giving it any input, I actually chose no. That's kind of strange too, because I think most people, when they choose to run something like dnf install name of program, you don't have to ask them, is this okay? I mean, you can ask them, but the default should be yes. Of course it's okay. That's why I typed the dang command in the terminal. And this has also been a problem with me and Fedora, and especially just plain vanilla GNOME, is GNOME's heavy. GNOME's heavy on every distribution. The Ubuntu guys hack on GNOME a little bit to get it to run a little better, but on most distributions, just plain vanilla GNOME from upstream uses way too much system resources. The 2 CPUs I gave this thing on most systems, on most desktop environments and window managers, the CPU usage right now when I'm doing nothing should be close to 0%, and it's using like 14% of one CPU. It's like, and I've got a Threadripper, by the way, so I gave this thing 2 threads of a Threadripper, and it's using that much CPU. Now this isn't a VM, and it's probably using Wayland. If I logged into Xorg, that's probably a little better. Also, the RAM usage was very high. When I first launched htop, it was 1.2 gigs. It's settled down to 800 megs. 800 megs is pretty respectable for GNOME. It's heavy, but 800 megs I can live with. But there for a while, it was pushing well over a gig. That was weird. Let me close out htop. I'm going to launch it again. Yeah, and it's settled back down to just under 800 megs. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's not bad. I'm going to close the terminal here. I'm going to go back into the menu system here. And really, we don't have much else as far as software installed by default. We've looked at everything. The text editor, of course, is GNOME's gedit, plain text editor. A fine text editor. We have GNOME videos, GNOME weather. There is a utilities subcategory here. And this is where you would find things like your archive manager, your calculator, your character maps. You do have a document viewer, a font viewer. Really not much, it's pretty minimal out of the box, and I like that. I like that it doesn't install like just a ton of crap, especially stuff that you probably are just going to end up removing yourself anyway. I'm going to right click on the desktop, and I am going to choose change background. Let's see what kind of wallpapers are included in Fedora 32. Looks like we have some pretty nice wallpapers to choose from. It looks like some of this is just the standard GNOME wallpaper pack. I've seen some of these many times in the past. I've seen this one, in past wallpaper packs for GNOME. Yeah, that's nice. I like the Fedora logo on that. And if I was choosing something, I like minimal wallpapers. This one here in black and white. That is really nice, actually, for this GTK theme and the GNOME shell theme that we're using. Yeah, I don't mind that one either. That's pretty classy there. Yeah, I could go with something like that. That's not bad. One thing I will say, just playing around for half an hour or so in this VM, is this GNOME here in Fedora 32 is slow. There's some latency issues. There's some lag. It's not responsive. And I think some of that is to do with the fact that we are using Wayland. And some of you guys are probably going to see how slow this thing is in this VM and get the wrong idea. So just to make sure that that is the case, I'm going to log in to the Xorg session and see if we get a little bit better response. All right, and this is Xorg. Let me launch a terminal here. I still got to search for the terminal. I wish I knew. There's got to be a hotkey for it, but I'm going to do a xrandr -s, and then I'm going to do 1920 by 1080. If I move things around, let's see. I can already tell the mouse moves better. The menu systems are a lot smoother, yeah. At least in this VM, I mean, X11 is what you want to do here. Yeah, all the widgets now, yeah. Wayland may be fine on physical equipment, I don't know, but it's really not ready for prime time. So for me, I never bother with Wayland, but the reason I never bother with Wayland, of course, is I do this YouTube channel. I need a lot of the X11 utilities, and Wayland's not ready for prime time for the kind of stuff I do, you know, video content creation. I know sometimes you guys ask me, hey man, why don't you give Wayland a real shot? Uninstall X11, all of X11, and just do Wayland and use one of these Wayland window managers like Sway or whatever is out there. It's like, well, do you never want me to do content on YouTube again? You know, Wayland is still alpha quality software. It's been in development since like 2009, 2010. They've been working on it like 11 years. And it's nowhere near being ready for prime time. And it probably is at least another 10 years before it ever gets to that point. By the time Wayland is ready, we may have moved on to a different display manager by then. It's taking so long for this thing to get to the point where it's actually usable. But anyway, that was a quick look at Fedora 32. Their GNOME edition. It's Fedora, and it's like Fedora in the past. Fedora, a fine distribution. I like the repositories of Fedora. You can find all the software you want. Now, if you need proprietary software, you're going to have to enable the RPM Fusion repos. You might have to enable the United RPM repo. That's another one I usually enable. But if you know to do that, you know, all your software is available in Fedora. I've never had problems running Fedora. Even on my physical equipment, I could install Fedora 32 and I could make videos. You know, everything would work. OBS and Kdenlive. I could get my video drivers. Even I run AMD cards, but even when I was running NVIDIA, the proprietary drivers, I could get NVENC set up in Fedora. You know, a lot easier than something like Ubuntu, for example. Some of the latest Ubuntus, getting some of that stuff to work is a real pain, where in Fedora, these kinds of things are pretty simple, actually. Fedora has always been one of the distros I could run. Like, I could install Fedora and live in. The only thing, my criticisms with Fedora, and it doesn't apply to a user like me, but if they are actually trying to appeal to the masses, you know, Fedora is not the most attractive distro. I mean, they'd get some things right. They need a better icon set. I wish the Fedora guys would talk to the GNOME guys and commission somebody to create you guys a new icon set. Now, before I go, I need to thank a few special people. I need to thank Michael, Mitchell, Gabe, Chris, Chuck, DJ, Donnie, Dylan, George, Haplo, Nate, LibreQuest, Omri, Paul, Rob, Sean, and Willie. These guys, they're my highest tiered patrons over on Patreon. They are the producers of this show. Show's also brought to you by all these fine ladies and gentlemen. All these names you're seeing on the screen right now, these are all my supporters over on Patreon, because this channel is community sponsored. It's sponsored by you guys. No corporate sponsors here on DistroTube. If you'd like to support the channel, you'll find me over on Patreon. All right, guys.